Hi, I'm Beth. Welcome to my channel, Mindful Yoga with Yogi Beth C. Today I'm going to offer a yoga practice of 2-minute holds. Now, I did a previous yoga practice with 2-minute holds that was really popular. People asked me for a follow-up, so here it is. And this one will be using a chair, and the chair is going to help you sustain yourself in the hold position. Of course, you can come out of the pose earlier if that's what's best for your body, and I'll give you options as we go along. This practice is going to have a little bit of focus on the hips and the hamstrings. Okay, so have your chair by your side. We're going to start on the floor, either in a seated or kneeling position for a little bit of a twisting pose. I have my clock nearby to time the poses. So several options here. One option is to be up on your knees, facing forward with the chair by your side, and you'll gently twist toward the chair, hold your hands anywhere on the chair that you can sustain this pose, and hold that way. You can also do the same thing seated on your heels, and then turn this way. So the seated versions will be the kneeling or the seated on your heels, but a little bit more of a spinal twist. It's our first pose, so we don't want to go too far. The other option, if you want to bring your hips into it a little bit more, is to come down to some version of a seated 90-90, or sometimes this is called mermaid, with the legs more stacked. You can decide how you want them to be, but you still have one hip facing the chair, and then you're going to gently twist from around the area of the belly button on up. Hold your position on the chair, and this you might feel a little bit more in your hips. So this is where I'm going to stay. As we start to settle ourselves in, we do want to try to find a position of stillness. So take those few moments at the start of the pose to find the best position for you. And then once you get there, then we try to settle in. So there's definitely a yin inspired aspect to this practice. We're not going to do all yin poses. We'll do a little bit of yang. But we are incorporating yin principles in the idea of holding a pose for time, finding your kind of Goldilocks, your edge, your perfect position in that pose, and releasing the actions of the muscles that don't have to work. So here, I'm tensing up my shoulder a little bit. I can move my position on the hand to release that a little bit more. We use the breath to breathe and to nourish in the pose. I'm not really trying to be too intense. I could push this hip forward and get a more intensive stretch there. It really doesn't feel good for the first pose of my practice, so I'm keeping it pretty chill in this hold. All right, we just have a few more breaths left here. Now, once we go to the second side, you can simply turn around. I'm going to bring my chair to the other side so that you can still see me. So move whatever props you're using, your chair, your clock, although I'm timing here for you. So quick reminder that we have various positions that we can do this in. We can stay very upright and turn here, and that's going to give us a little bit more twist in the spine. You can let the hips turn with the spine if you'd like. You can be seated on your heels, same thing, or some version of your 90-90, your mermaid. In yin, this is called deer pose. I'm going to take a version of deer pose. Find yourself in a comfortable seat, and then when you feel relatively settled in your seat, make sure you have your clock if you're using it. Breathe in and be tall, and then gently twist to your chair. So the chair is there to make it a little easier to sustain ourselves in this twist for a longer period of time. The chair is not necessarily making the pose easier or harder. The thing that it's making easier is that time aspect, that we want to stay in the posture and really relax into the posture for a period of time. So I'm arranging my hands wherever they naturally kind of land. letting them fall lightly. I'm not doing anything in particular with my hands or my arms. That's true for my head as well. My natural position is to keep the head relatively in line with the center of my chest. If I wanted to add some degree of a neck stretch to this, I could turn my head away from my knees or toward my knees. I could also make this softer by letting my head gently nod toward my chest. Although we want to be in stillness as you're in the pose, you might feel some sensation build. If that ever builds to the point where it's not sustainable, do adjust your pose so that you can hold for time or come out of the pose completely. That's your option. All right, last few breaths on this side. Okay, then slowly start to unwind yourself. We're going to stay in a kneeling position. I'm going to turn away from my chair. And we'll do a version of yin saddle pose, or you can also think of this if you're more into a flow or yang practice as a version of camel pose. And once again, there's going to be different ways to do that. So my back is going to be to the chair. The target here is to stretch the front of the hips, the hip flexors that are often in our flex position and don't often get to stretch long. So that's the target. Now, one way, this is more maybe looking a little bit more like camel pose, is to be on upright knees and find a place where you can lean back. You might let your hips come right back to the chair and be supported on the chair. And then take a little lean here, let your arms be as relaxed as possible. You could also be on your forearms. So that feels pretty good to me. I might be there, but I want to show you coming down onto your feet. And you adjust your knees as works for your body. So they can be closer together, they can be further apart. And you lean back this way and then lift your hips from here. Actually, I think this feels a little bit better for me. So I'm going to stay with this version. I'm trying to let my arms relax, but they are working to hold me here a little bit. My lower ribs are just touching the back of the chair. I am feeling a pretty intense stretch in the front of my thighs and my hip flexors, so we'll see if I can sustain this for the 2 minutes. I might have to adjust in order to keep the pose sustainable for me. And then I let myself breathe here. You may wish to close your eyes and soften. You can incorporate these yin principles into a yang or a flow or vinyasa practice as well when you're holding poses. So whenever you hold a pose, there'll be parts of your body that are targeted, that are stressed. And by stress, we just mean the parts of the body that are working, the muscles that are stressing to hold you there. And then parts of your body that don't need to work, that can relax. Often we might find that our facial muscles, our facial expression wants to add to the pose by sort of scrunching up as if it could hold us more in the pose. And so that's an area we can soften and relax. Here, my shoulders might creep up to my ears. So I can, even though again, the backs of my shoulders are helping hold me here, I can let myself ease and relax more into this pose, maybe shake around a little bit to find the place where I can be still and soft. And you may well hear my breath here. Last breath or two in this pose. And yes, I'm talking to help distract us from the time a little bit. All right, take a breath and slowly help yourself out of it. If your hips were up, you can set them back down in your heels. Walk your body up. Sometimes you might feel the need for a little counter stretch, moving in the other direction for a moment. You might even round the back. Little mini cat there. All right, we're coming up to a standing position. So from standing, we're going to come into our standing pose stance. So your front leg, whatever side you're on, is going to be snuggled up pretty close to your chair. Your back leg is going to be out. Now you know that we're sustaining, so maybe you don't take as wide a stance as you might usually. I'll leave that up to you. When you bend your front leg, the shin or somewhere below your knee is resting against the chair in a way that feels comfortable to you. And the chair might feel metal or hard. You can put a blanket or a towel there to make it softer. Your back leg is extended. You might even think of lifting the inside, the inner thigh of the back leg away. I'm going to take my front foot a little bit forward of my back foot. And then we're going to start to hinge. So you're hinging at the side of your hip. And come into a side angle pose, and we'll find a variation that works. So we can be here with our forearm on the seat of the chair. We can be more here with our arm stretched out over the chair. That's probably where I'm going to stay. If you have a longer torso and longer reach than mine, you might have your forearm over the back of the chair. Any comfortable position with the arm, you can have your hand certainly just flat on the chair as well. Maybe that's what's working best for me today. And then you can either keep your back arm toward your back hip. You can reach it up in the air, over your ear, or depending on your level of extension, maybe you reach it all the way toward the top of the chair. That's not really going to be the position that works for me. So I'm going to reach toward, over my head, over my ear, and see if I can find a sustained version of this for 2 minutes. Now we've been here maybe half a minute, and already I'm feeling a lot of stuff going on in my thigh. You also have the option to do 1 minute per side, and then you can repeat. So that might feel like a better option. Just like we did in the other poses, your neck can go wherever is comfortable for you. And I think maybe we are going to do 1 minute per side. That will be our 2 minutes. So we have another few seconds on this side. That feels a little bit more appropriately sustainable to me. All right, and then walk your hand back up. Slowly lift yourself out. And yeah, I think when you come up, you might feel like 1 minute was enough. I'm going to move my chair back to the other side. Again, you can stay on that side and just turn away from me. If you're using the chair, do make sure that it feels secure on your mat. I recommend having all 4 legs of the chair on your mat so it doesn't slide away from you. All right, finding our standing pose on the second side, bringing that front leg fairly close to the chair so that you can find a place where your shin gets to be a little bit supported by the chair. Take your back foot. You can absolutely be in a shorter standing pose stance if you like. So no rules about that. We're changing things up. You can change up how the pose looks in your body. Find a place where you can start to hinge over the front leg. And maybe your hand is there. Maybe you come down to the forearm. And you can see this is a place I can come to. It just doesn't feel quite where I want to be today, so I'm not going to. Hand can be on the back of the chair. I'm going to take a similar position to what I did on the first side, with my hand flat on the chair. It could be closer to you or further away. Back arm can stay on your hip, over your shoulder, or perhaps now that you know we're only going to hold for 1 minute, maybe reaching overhead. And then find a bit of stillness. Might be a little bit of wiggling as you find that place where it's sustainable. If you start to feel some muscle shake, as long as it's not painful, maybe you feel that you can work through that, or perhaps you do something like adjust the hand a little bit to make it more sustainable for the amount of time. We have about 2 more breaths on this side. All right, bring your arm down if it was up. Walk your bottom hand back toward your body, unbend your legs, straighten up. Take a moment. You can be in a wide stance or a close stance. A little bit of rebound, finding your breath. Okay, we're going to turn toward the chair for pyramid pose. This is a pose that you definitely might feel a little bit more in your hamstrings, the backs of your legs, and you can adjust the position of your legs to intensify or to decrease the amount of stretch depending on what you're needing here. So we're going to take one leg forward toward the chair. You can snuggle your shin up to the chair, but it doesn't have to be. Step the other leg back, and we're trying to push the back heel toward the floor for more of a hamstring stretch. If you're more on the ball of your back of the foot, that's fine. And we'll turn toward the chair, so that means turning both hips toward the chair. If the hips aren't toward the chair, there's nothing wrong with that. You're just not going to concentrate the stretch as much in your back leg hamstring. And then from here, I'm going to start with my hands on the hips, so really feeling the place of the hip crease. That's where I'm going to hinge. So I'm not sending my hips back to the side, I'm sending them straight back. And then my hands can come to the top of the chair. They can come to the seat of the chair. So the stretch here is actually in the front leg hamstring. The back leg hamstring, I'm actually going to step it back a little bit more because it feels okay to me, is getting a nice deep calf stretch. At least that's where the stretch is for me. And then this one I think will be doable for us to hold for 2 minutes. So we'll start to settle in. Again, you can notice your breath and think about the breath sending your body long. So leg long into the femur, into your hip girdle, foot pressed into the bottom of the ground. Same with the back leg, the top of your leg, your femur connected to your pelvis, your hips, while the heel of the back leg presses away. And then you notice how my tailbone is moving in one direction, and I can feel that action of my tailbone moving in one direction, and let my spine extend long, the crown of my head in the opposite direction. I don't have to sustain my head. If it feels comfortable, I might let my chin soften and come down. If I wanted a little bit more of an upper back bend or space across my chest, I could even press down into my hands, move my chest forward, look forward or up a little bit. I'm going to stay in a fairly neutral place for my spine though here for about 3 or 4 more breaths. Last breath in and out. And soften the front knee, step or slide the back foot in. You could stay here in a little L pose shape or come up standing. Taking a moment to be in a more neutral space and more neutral shape before we go to the second side. And then step your second leg forward toward the chair, opposite leg back. You can adjust these as you start to find your pose. My hips are about hip width apart. You might like wider as you start to lean forward. Test your hands on the back of the chair first to see where you are on this side. Let the front leg move towards straight, but without the knee being locked. So don't push the back of the knee away. Let that be a little soft. Think more about pushing the back of the hamstring toward the back of the room. Find the position for your back foot where it feels supportive, and maybe a little bit of a hamstring stretch there. And then we'll start to find our sustained pose. Think about that length that we found on the first side, the length in the front leg, the length in the back leg, the length in the spine. You can even think about the sense of length in our breath, feeling the breath long through the torso and the in-breath. And that same length moving through our body on the exhale. Remember that as you hold the pose, in order to keep that hold, you might need to change your position a little bit, adjust so that it feels sustainable. So if we're at our 100% all the time, that's not a sustainable place in yoga or in life. This feels sustainable, but you might actually be able to observe a little bit of shaking in my front leg. Some of the muscles that aren't used to working quiver there. I'll hold this for about 2 to 3 more breaths. And slowly soften the front knee, step the back foot in. And remember, if you'd like to take a moment for a little bit of a hinge, maybe even resting your forehead on your arms, or come straight up and take a breath or two in your neutral, tall mountain pose. Last pose. This time we'll be seated on the chair. And I recommend as you sit down, you sit right on the edge of the chair. So the chair is a support for our sits bones, not our back, because our back is going to be hinging forward. I'm going to do a forward fold. That's going to be our last pose. Forward folds tend to be a little bit relaxing, so hopefully we can chill into this final posture. Take your legs out so that you're on your heels. This is the starting place, and we can adjust from here. So you can absolutely keep your knees bent. They don't have to be straight. You can take them maybe as wide in your mat. Just make sure your sits bones are pretty grounded. If you come wide, it might feel a little bit like you're going to topple over, and yet that also gives a nice amount of space for your body to bend into. So going down far doesn't matter. You'll notice that in this position, that if I'm going to stay here for this version of a seated caterpillar or forward fold, as you slide your hands forward, you may not have to come very far at all to start to feel an engagement of your hamstrings and possibly the muscles of your lower back as well. And remember that engagement is a sense of stretch, a sense of maybe a little discomfort as the muscles are being asked to stretch, not pain, especially in the lower back area. If there's anything painful, sharp, we want to avoid that, change the positioning of our body. And in this last pose, just like we did in the other poses, you can keep your neck long, your head in line with your spine, or you can allow a softening of your chin. If you don't have any spinal issues, you can even allow a whole softening of your upper back in this pose. So that's a nice option if you want your pose to be a little bit more relaxed You want to focus more on the stretch. You might do more of a hinge at your hips, like I'm doing. For these last few breaths, encourage the exhale to be a little bit longer than the inhale if you want to encourage that relaxation response in your body even more. One more full in and out breath. Start to walk your hands back up your legs. Walk your legs back in. And that is it for today's practice. How did you like it? Give me a thumbs up if you did like it. Please do comment down below. That helps give me feedback and also lets me know if you want another 2-minute practice. You can try the past one that I did. And if you like the idea of yin, you can also try some of my yin practices. I hope this worked well for you. Enjoy the rest of your day.